Are you tired of being confused and frustrated by your business books? Do you want to do your own business bookkeeping but don't know where to begin? I can help. My name is Crystal Wambeck and I am a certified bookkeeper. I'm the creator of the Simple Bookkeeping Program. This online, work at your own pace video course will take you from confused to confident when it comes to your business books. Log into accountingbycrystal.com and sign up today.
Why is the shopping cart always in the top right of the screen?
How do companies predict my purchases?
Why do prices end in 9?
Why do fast food companies use red and yellow in their logos?
Why do restaurants always have one expensive menu item?
Researchers, marketers, and very curious people seek the answers for how we make decisions and how we choose products. Clicksuasion finds the secrets that companies use and shares them with you.
Why do I feel better when I bought the last remaining airline ticket?
How do I make choices based on colors and fonts?
Welcome to Clicksuasion. This is your host, Michael Barbera. Today's guest is Michael Fishman. Michael is excited to join us today, and we are equally excited to have him on the show. So tell you a little bit about Michael Fishman. Well, for the last 20 years, Michael has been a leading advisor on marketing, positioning, and sustained business growth to consumer health information and product businesses. Highlights include 18 years supporting Rodale in growing the prevention and men's health publishing brands, taking their book business from ground level to $300 million annually, and working with such people as Dr. Weil, Mark Hyman, Christiane Northrup, Daniel Amon, and a long list of others. Additionally, Michael leads the annual Consumer Health Summit, the private invitational 90-person gathering for founders and personalities, which he created in 1994. He also leads Think Tank Sessions, a 2-day platform for 6 founders to work on accelerated growth towards a clearly identified long game outcome. Michael, welcome to Clicksuasion.
Good morning, Mike. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. So I'm really curious, how do you get invited to the Consumer Health Summit?
That's a good question. Well, it's a curated event. It's not marketed. It's not recorded. It's a safe space, if you will, a conversational event. And the people that are there tend to be the leading personalities, the leading founders in B2C, business to consumer health with information or products. And they're, in most cases, the leading financial performers in the category or companies and founders that are fast rising, that are ascending really quickly. But what they all have in common is that they are leading their businesses from the purpose that they are in this world to help people. You know, they're performing financially at the head of the category because of their purpose, because of their execution, because of the customer-centric marketing and service platforms and so forth. So they're not out chasing a buck. They're out chasing positive impact, and they're executing effectively. And those are the kinds of people that are there. And they're also very generous with each other. So there's a real spirit of helpfulness among everybody as well.
You know, I like how you mentioned that they're out more so creating good than chasing a dollar. How does that? Let me rephrase this question. How important is that, or what is the significance of promoting better health while also sustaining a good business model?
Well, I think the question's never been posed quite that way before. And for those listening, we're definitely on the fly here. I think there's something congruous or consistent or integrous, if you will, with the business of helping people with their health and having business integrity, business ethics, sound practices, customer-loving practices, if you will. Now, from my perspective, every business should have those things, no matter what they're offering. But to this particular category of consumer health, there's just something off when you have a business that doesn't model all those great practices. And as you know, Mike, it's rare to have a company that isn't a healthy company whose customers are happy. You know, healthy work cultures, healthy, compassionate leadership, and products with efficacy and value those kinds of companies tend to have happy customers, and it's unusual to find happy customers associated with a company that isn't itself healthy.
So obviously, we know that there's importance to the brands, the organizations who attend the Consumer Health Summit. How does the end user benefit from this conference?
The participants there come because they're purpose driven, because they operate in a spirit of generosity, and because they are running great businesses. They come away with three things. They come away with relationships, of course. They come away with tactics to go home and execute, share with their CMO, share with their marketing teams, share with their product and service teams, tactics to test or simply implement if they're smart and on the face of it. And then community. Even in this, we're 20 some odd years into the internet, or something like that, but face to face and connection, are more important than ever. And typically in a business category where founders and personalities do see the greater good in collaborating, do see the greater good in information sharing, masterminding, whatever label you want to assign to those kinds of conversations. Getting together is very, very important. And there's very few categories that I know of where competitors can actually sit in a room together, share their successes, share their challenges, and actually share the diagnostics behind both the successes and the challenges with people in the room that one could say are competing for the same attention or even the same dollars. So Consumer Health Summit has been a passion project of mine. What I say is I'm not in the event business. I advise in these categories throughout the year with private clients, but Consumer Health Summit is an annual gathering, as we've discussed. That's always in my awareness because I'm curating who's coming. I'm curating the speakers who typically don't appear elsewhere or rarely do. But it's a community that from which people get tactics, from which people get relationships, and from which people get really inspiration and ongoing affirmation of what they're here in the world to accomplish.
I also have a passion for what I do, and I often advocate that, well, if you don't have a passion for what you do, it's time to do something else. If you don't like what you do, you're more than likely the end user or the person who would benefit from your services might not, have the full advantage. So in a field such as, or any field could be intimidating or scary. Now, I have to admit, if I was to read the back of a shampoo bottle or sometimes read ingredients in food packaging, I might get scared and intimidated because I can't read read some of the words. Sometimes it's easier to learn a second language than it is to read some of those words. Where did your passion come from? How did you find yourself coming into health products and just this industry in general?
Yeah. Well, when I was growing up, my mother had Prevention magazine around the house, which has been a significant and really admired publishing brand. Consumer magazine, mostly read by women, which was founded, I think, in the early 50s. So that magazine was always around. And when I completed my undergraduate degree and was, thinking about what direction I wanted to take, because I knew I was done with school, graduate school wasn't the fit for me. But I was in a marketing agency in New York, and when I had my first opportunity to develop account work, I called down to Rodale, which was the publisher of Prevention. I just had a strong feeling that I wanted to support businesses as an advisor or with whatever services I was associated to support businesses that were helpful to people. I mean, that was the first thing that occurred to me, and health seemed like the obvious place. And I'm sure there's no accident, because I have found a home and a passion and a playing field to express whatever my gifts are in consumer health. In advising Rodale for what turned into an 18-year client relationship, that engagement came to the attention of the publishers of the Andrew Weil newsletter, and even Tony Robbins' publisher, and many other publishers of both personal brands and other product companies. And to the point that we shared earlier, competitors tend to flock together in direct-to-consumer marketing, not in the general advertising world as much, if at all, but in the measurable areas of marketing where CMOs and companies can see that there's a greater good to collaboration and a greater good to being with advisors who know the category from not only from past engagements, but from current work. The clients tend to flock together. And so my work supporting Rodale and prevention and launching men's health for them, attracted a lot of other comparable clients, which I was able to accept over the years. And that became my passion.
What are some differences or maybe challenges that are associated with marketing in your industry opposed to other industries?
When talking about health solutions, whether it's a book or a magazine or a supplement or a food of some kind, there's more of a rigorousness around what you can say and what you can promise. There is actually regulatory boundaries with respect to claims and the benefits that you can promise. So there's what might look to consumers like kind of a wild, wild west of uncontrolled promises really isn't. There are always rogue, people or, people that are kind of pushing that and making bigger promises than they should. But for the most part, you have an industry and a category which is very mindful of the language that's being used and how promises are being made and what's the research and the science behind that. So if you're in some other kind of business of automobiles or tennis rackets, or it's just not as rigorous. We're unbound by we're only as limited as our creativity, as they say, but we also have a lot of guidelines. And the other thing is that when you're supporting people with their health, there needs to be a very powerful foundation of trust and credibility that's established, no matter what you're offering, but particularly when you're offering something to people that's ingestible, like a nutritional supplement. There's actually a very strong foundation of trust that's required at the very beginning of that relationship, and establishing that in a compassionate and legitimate way is something that most other categories do not have to contend with.
How does the consumer build trust with a brand in your industry?
Well, it's if you don't mind, it's actually the other way around.
I do mind.
The company or the personality has to, of course, install trust or create trust with the consumer, right? And there's a few ways. There's a couple ways. Number one is, in the case of a personal brand, there are credentials. What a physician or a coach or a healing or health professional of some kind. The interesting thing, Mike, is that what I've seen over the years is that expressions of transparency or personal story, if you will, are actually more effective at establishing credibility than credentials themselves. So, in other words, your personal story, your journey, your passion are install credibility more readily than even an MD credential. There are many personalities who are not credentialed doctors who have powerful personal stories and huge online audiences and communities that trust them, at a very deep level. The other things besides personal story or transparency are, of course, track record, years in business, years in development. Professor Michael Norton at Harvard, who has actually spoken at my Consumer Health Summit, talks about this idea of showing your work. Like in math class when we were growing up, and you did division or the way it used to be, when you did long math calculations, instead of just putting down your answer, the teacher would say, show your work. And there's an aspect of showing your work in business that helps to establish credibility in a very powerful way. So when consumers know that what you are offering them wasn't just developed last week, but was years in development, clinical trials, experimentation, sourcing of ingredients, the things that actually, that somebody did their homework. That also is a powerful component of the establishment of credibility.
As you're giving these answers, I'm nodding here, agreeing you with trust and transparency. My wheels are also spinning. My gears are going and thinking about the customer life cycle. Now, obviously, we know that trust is important. Transparency is important to show the customer what is happening, why it's happening, and why it's important to that person. Then I'm thinking about the trends associated with your industry. Some products have very long life cycles, and some products have very short life cycles. So can you talk, first correct me if I'm wrong, but can you talk about how long, well, I mean, it's a little subjective, but the longitudinal effect of trust, how long does it take to gain trust, and then how that affects the trend or the overall length of the life cycle of the product?
Beautiful question. Here's the thing. A lot of companies, whether they be personal brands or companies that are not personal brands, they do the things that establish trust either as an afterthought or a footnote, or many times not at all, because they just don't realize the importance. Trust is the foundation upon which your promises and the benefits that you claim for your product or service can actually be received with believability. So the foundation is trust, and therefore it has to happen right away. So when someone comes to, let's say, to a website, and the eye and the brain are taking that person, down the page. I mean, we look at web pages consciously, but the eyes and the brain are doing a lot of things in a reactive way that are below the level of consciousness, or are driven by the limbic brain, if you will. And so I talk frequently about not only the verbal articulation of personal story or transparency or credentials or track record or years in business or years in development, those kinds of things, but the sequence in which they are presented at the beginning of the relationship. Also other aesthetic or qualitative attributes of a website, let's say, that can either have somebody feel safe or could bounce, what we call bounce, or just leave that web page for reasons they're not even aware of, but their brain took them out of the game. And that could be something as simple as a typeface that is taxing the brain. Typefaces, what they call serif typefaces, or certain colors, or stock photography, which is clearly staged. The kinds of things that are impersonal, certain colors and other attributes that are repellents to either men or women, creating gender neutrality if it's appropriate to the brand. So credibility happens right at the beginning. It's the foundation upon which your promises land with legitimacy, and it's also a way to have the human brain, the unconscious mind, feel safe and allow that human to actually stay engaged. As you know, our brain is always on alert for survival threats, and not all of them are snakes and tigers and really dangerous things. Some of them are just experiential, where your brain takes you out of the game because it doesn't feel safe. And of course, for women, a feeling of safety and compassion is particularly important. It's important for human beings, but it's particularly important in practicality for women.
Let's build on that. So we're talking about credibility and decision-making, experiential behavior. There's several ways that consumers could be introduced to a new product. There are peer reviews, there's television commercials, there's television personalities. There's also physician recommendations, which also may or may not come from other persuasive tactics, say pharmaceutical companies hosting lunches for physicians' offices. Which of these do you say work, don't work, or are the most persuasive in your industry?
My sweet spot is consumers and how consumers respond to these kinds of things. Probably the number one way I think would be the endorsement or the articulation of benefit from a person, from a human being. And I think that's why in consumer health, we see not only lots of personal brands or personalities, if you will, but also some of the significant companies that are not personalities, what I call humanized by their founders. So as an example, there's a company called Bulletproof, and the founder is a well-known guy in Silicon Valley and increasingly around the country named Dave Asprey. And what I told Bulletproof early on through the 4 years of advising them was that we needed to move Dave from center stage to side stage. So not to position it as a personal brand, but to humanize it as this company called Bulletproof that had the founder somewhat off stage, but really a trusted voice, a guy who's done his homework, who knows the science backwards and forwards to support people understanding what it is about his coffee or his other foods or his supplements that actually make them believable. And once again, personal, Dave has a compelling personal story. Other personalities like Tim Ferriss, who wrote The 4-Hour Work Week and The 4-Hour Body. Not a doctor, but somebody who's done a lot of self-experimentation and a lot of homework on health products. Chris Carr, who wrote Crazy Sexy Cancer, who's been living and thriving somehow miraculously with cancer for over a decade. And then, of course, doctors, medical doctors and chiropractors and naturopathic physicians. So the guidance of a founder can be and usually is very powerful if that person is landing for his or her viewers and customers with legitimacy, with authenticity, with purpose. The other very meaningful contributor to credibility and to people feeling comfortable and safe is the community of which they're a part. Peer reviews, other customer reviews, thus the popularity of sites like Yelp, other review sites that are really community provided reviews are very powerful as well.
Looking back at all your experience and everything you've accomplished, what is something that you know today that you wish you knew, say, 20 years ago?
It's great, Mike. Two things which really are twins or go hand in hand, and two very simple premises. One is, and both have to do with the linguistic aspects of marketing and communication, and having and the establishment of trust. One, and these are simple tests, if you will. One is don't be easily understood, be impossible to misunderstand. And there's quite actually a very meaningful difference between being easily understood, where you actually, as a marketer or as a writer, as a communicator, are lending some faith to the fact that your words and phrases will be understood, versus being impossible to misunderstand. Visine eye drops has had for decades and still has the tagline, gets the red out. Gets the red out. That's impossible to misunderstand. And lots of personalities and lots of brands try to be smart or clever or believable or a whole range of attributes, and they forget that clarity is the number one attribute of all effective marketing. Clarity and compassion. Clarity actually is compassion. The other one is to not only market and communicate and present yourself in such a way that consumers understand you, but that they also feel understood by you. There are ways of communicating with consumers which they can intellectually understand or comprehend, but which don't really resonate at the heart level. And clear, compassionate communication is not only impossible to misunderstand, but also speaks to people in the words that they use in conversation when discussing the product or service that you offer. So those are two tests, if you will, that I'm constantly running in my mind as I review products and campaigns, and those are incredibly simple, but really realizations of recent years that would have been super effective to have known a decade or two ago.
Michael, what's next for you?
With all the great companies and all the great founders supporting consumers with their health, the fact is that this entire category does occur for the consumer as a bit of a fire hose. There's a lot coming at consumers, and a lot of different products, a lot of different choices, a lot of different ways of confronting, either the preservation of health or addressing, health challenges that people have. And so it's difficult to make the choice. And when they do make the choice, incredibly, lots of books and lots of supplements and lots of health products get purchased and then not even used. And then sometimes when people do use them, they don't comply. So we have an entire industry that's really creating sustainable change in a very small percentage of the people that are coming into contact with these messages and with these products. And that's a concern to me. So one of the things that I am committed to doing is creating a platform based on some really firmly rooted psychological principles of habit formation that will enable people to take the baby steps and to really transform their relationship, to shift their relationship with their own ability to make a change and to make it stick. And Professor B.J. Fogg at Stanford University is one of the global authorities on the foundation components and the psychology of habit formation. And he and I are in good communication. He's been a part of the Consumer Health Summit community for a few years now. And, one of the things I'm committed to doing is taking the verified principles of habit formation and creating a platform that gives people the opportunity to actually select a few things that they would like to do, really baby steps, and to feel like they can win. Most people's most familiar experience of their own past attempts to change for the better are associated with either disappointment or failure. And we need to give more people more opportunities to choose the things they'd like to do, to begin to make changes with doable baby steps, and to feel successful so that they can continue on with bigger and even more impactful things to improve their health.
Well, we're going to have to bring you back on the show for habits and behavior change. This is a hot topic, very popular with a lot of our audience.
That would be wonderful, Mike. I look forward to it.
So do we. If any of the listeners want to work with you, get in contact with you, or just ask a question, say how to pronounce something in your industry like I would, how could they reach you?
Well, sure. I appreciate that, Mike. And anybody that would like to reach out, I promise to respond. You can reach me. Well, for your audience, Mike, why don't I give my direct email if that's okay with you? which would be michaelfishman33@gmail.com, or if you prefer, at Michael Fishman on Twitter.
Perfect. Michael, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us on Clicksuasion.
Mike, thanks for the honor. You're doing great work in the world, and it's been an honor to hang out. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I appreciate the kind words. And for the listeners, go ahead and subscribe to Clicksuasion wherever you get your podcast, and we'll let you know when the next episode is available.
Thanks for listening to Clicksuasion. Subscribe to the podcast, read our research, and get in touch with us at clicksuasion.com. You can also find us on Twitter with the handle @Clicksuasion. You know when your customers are shopping at your business and they pick up a product? The customer holds it, feels it, and shows it to their friend. Then they look at the price tag.
Oh my, I need to look at something else.
The customer picks up a second item and loves the way it looks. They've heard of this product, but haven't yet seen it in person.
I've got to have this.
You're happy the customer chose to buy a product, but you're equally frustrated that they didn't buy both items.
I want them both.
The Consumer Experience Lab at Barbera Solutions designs behavioral strategies that target the consumer's decision-making process. BarberaSolutions.com. Because the opposite of rational is not irrational. BARBERA Solutions.com.